Really? Oh, that was.
You didn't know that?
No, I
From
didn't.
rehab,
That
and then
definitely looks
They
like
shouldn't
it.
have left
Yeah,
that
that's
city.
the
Now
hotel.
the ambulance is going
Yeah.
in. That's a huge driver.
Peggy, we stayed in the hotel
Insurance
where
companies.
they did The Shining. The movie The
The only
Shining.
time the
Did you
hospital's
see
on the
anything
hook
it's
is
supposed to be
if
on?
somebody's discharged from the emergency
They
room
would give you
and returns
upstairs
within.
with a little girl.
It's either 24/7 or
Really?
24/7 hours
But
with the same
the
illness.
hotel was full.
And the hospital's on the hook for it.
It was packed.
Because they shouldn't have.
Okay, I think we're gonna get started, everybody. Good evening and welcome to tonight's August 15th public hearing for the Ordinance Review Committee. This hearing has been called by the Ordinance Review Committee to provide information and allow public comment regarding proposed ordinance amendments. Copies are available of tonight's public hearing out on the desk out there if you haven't got your copy yet. During the public hearing, members of the public will be called upon by the committee chair, ensuring that everyone who wishes to participate has an opportunity to do so. When called upon, please step up to the podium, state your name and your town of residence. We ask that the audience members be respectful when someone is addressing the committee and refrain from side conversations. Any individuals who are continually disruptive may be asked to leave the hearing. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting, and the floor is open. We can start with any article that you guys want, if you want to get up and so.
My name is Ken Burr, 29 Poor Farm Road. I have a question on each of the first three articles, so I don't know how you want to do it one by one.
Sure,
or
you
how
can
we
start
wanna
with
do it.
one.
Okay, number one, doing away with the contract zone.
Yeah.
What is going to be in its place? Anything, or what is the decision behind that?
I think that the committee really wanted to look at land use and just, basically the land use chart needs kind of an overhaul. There was a lot of ambiguity in the contract zone. I know that Brenda was here when we started talking about contract zoning. The CEO at that time, she wasn't really a big fan of it. Planning board didn't seem to feel one way or the other passionately. And I think I'm not speaking for everybody, but I know I personally felt like looking at the land use chart was a better way to.
So it's based on land use rather than on, okay.
Yeah.
Number two.
Yeah.
I know there's been some discussion about this one. The reason for having non-owner occupancy on a piece of property.
Why?
Yeah.
Anybody else I don't want to overrule everybody here, just.
I was for that, I pushed it, and my thoughts were that a lot of times, all people have is their property. And at some point, they might have an additional dwelling unit for a child, a relative, or just for income. And as they get older, they may not want to winter in Maine. So we don't see why it has to be regulated to the point that they are forced to live there. We just want to make it as flexible as possible to let property owners use their property.
You don't think it'd be fair to put it as a 6-month limit or something like that, 6 months on, 6 months on? Because don't forget, some of these places, like take around the ponds and non-conforming lots, they're very close together.
Yeah.
Okay, you can still have a ADU on that piece of property. So now you get two pieces of property, two people living, or two families living on this piece of property, and you have two on the other side. So you get four families living around a single piece of property. So that to me means you're putting a burden on the people that live there permanently to someone who wants to rent out the property rather than live there.
Will all the properties on the ponds be able to put additional dwelling units?
Pardon?
Will all the properties meet the
That's
requirements?
my, when I get to section 3, that's my next question. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I just don't think that's the case. I mean, it's not going to be cheap to put additional dwelling units. And then the return on investment may not be there for people. But I think what we're trying to do is put forth, or what people want to do is have ordinances that are not for the rule, but the exception, the possibility that this may happen, that may happen. I mean, when you think about it, we can always change the ordinance, but we just want to be less restrictive on people. That was simply the thoughts behind it. And, you know, there are people that rent properties, and I'm familiar with just, you know, my pond, and I don't think a lot of those camps can have additional dwelling units.
Okay, this will go to question 3 then. As I understand it then, if you're leaving it at A on Article 3, B 15.3, it says unless it's a legal non-conforming lot. So in other words, if the lot is non-conforming, then you cannot have an ADU or you can have one. That doesn't, to me, I'm confused with how it reads.
Where are you?
I'm on section Article 3.
Yeah.
Okay, B2A.
So Peggy?
Yeah.
My takeaway on that is that in the ordinance, I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but there is a non-conforming lot of records section.
Mhm.
And so I would refer to that as, how does that define a legally non-conforming lot? I don't have the book in front of me.
Yes.
So you can or you cannot build it on a non-conforming lot. As
Well,
long as,
it depends
all the setbacks,
The and
setbacks,
septic and so on and so
not
forth.
covered to more than 20% of the property,
Right.
sewer system and that sort of stuff.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
I don't think the majority of the
There are not,
sewer
no.
systems that are in place would sustain an additional dwelling unit.
Also, just to be clear too, like a legally non-conforming lot is typically a lot that, you know, was in conformance, you know, before the ordinance took effect, right? So if we went from 5 acres, you know, or 2 acres to 5 acre minimums, then a 2 acre lot created before that took effect would be a legally non-conforming lot. Basically, it's like another term for grandfathered.
Yes.
And then there's provisions in the ordinance in another section that detail like what you can and can't do. There's still some restrictions there, like, you know, just because it's a legally non-conforming doesn't mean you have carte blanche.
Right.
Does that make sense or
So-
help?
So without looking it up, but I'm getting ready to do that. We had a lot of conversation about this in our last meeting. And the way the ordinance is currently written, it's very restrictive on non-conforming lots. So the way I read this, my interpretation would be if they're a legally constituted as a non-conforming lot, they will not be allowed to put an ADU. That's the way I read it. That's my interpretation.
That's the way.
That's kind of what I thought it
Yes.
read, but it doesn't, it's kind of hard to understand it that way.
Yes, I agree.
And that's based on the other section of the ordinance that is very restrictive on non-conforming lots.
Okay, now,
And Buzzy just had something to
Yeah.
add to that.
The house on the corner of the Poor Farm Road, I put that in a number of years ago.
Yep.
This ordinance was changed after that, because I only had to meet the setback requirement of when the lot was created. The lot was created in 1971, I think, and I had to meet the setbacks in 1971.
okay, Kennybunk Pond has a different setback than all the rest of the ponds around. And it's only like a side setback is 10 feet, I believe, on either side, where in most of the other places it's 25,
But I'm
something
not
like
on
that.
the pond.
Yeah.
That one ain't on the pond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you gotta remember too, that all your housing developments, you know, here on 35, now have non-conforming lots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was
So-
changed, yeah.
To help them as well as everybody else. That's why we changed that. There's a lot of non-conforming lots here in town.
So we're only talking about non-conforming lots. We're not talking about non-conforming buildings on lots, right?
Correct,
I mean, this is only just zoning, not structure.
correct.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Come on up.
Brian Dulon, 105 Chapel Shores. Just a question on that. So if there's a house there that's big enough to split in half in a non-conforming shoreland lot, can that house be split in half and 2 units be put in?
Well, that would fall under the multi-unit section, which is like 10.19.
Yeah.
which, yeah, so it says for two-family multi-unit, you have to have 50% additional road frontage and
And
have to meet
Double
the
the
lot size.
acreage.
So you wouldn't be able to do that unless the lot was big enough that you could meet those requirements.
So if you're in a 5 acre zone, you gotta have 10 acres plus half again as much frontage.
Right, but if you're on the pond,
You still have
Can
to
you do
meet
that?
the requirements of that section. Because it very specifically defines a two-family multi-unit has to conform with X. And it's the 50% additional road frontage and the double the lot size.
and with LD 2003 or whatever it is coming in the state saying you can't stop multiple,
If they can meet setbacks.
Just have to meet the requirement.
but the house isn't changing. The house is there. It met setbacks. They're just putting a wall down the middle and having two families live in it.
I think it's.
So then-
Then that, they could do that.
Under the.
But the use has
600
changed.
Because your footprint
Hold on.
didn't change. If the septic works.
Right.
I mean, if the septic works, anybody could do that now on any lot. I mean, if it's
disagree.
a 4-bedroom, if it's a 4-bedroom though, I mean, if in my house, let's just say I'm on a 5 acre lot, well, you're talking shoreland only, correct?
Yeah. Well, no, everywhere. I mean,
Everywhere.
anyone could do it anywhere.
So anybody could do that anywhere, I would assume. It's, I
You
mean,
still have
under
to
an
meet the
ADU.
requirements of that section.
Mhm.
Do you have it?
For a duplex, is that what it is, a duplex?
Just the other one to
Well-
bring your attention, Brian, is ADU can't exceed 800 square feet.
800 square.
Right.
But you're
Which
not,
is-
you're not saying,
Six-
Just got to put the wall in the right spot. That's all.
you're not saying that they could sell
That's,
each side, are you?
They could rent both sides out.
Right, so the multifamily isn't the right section.
I don't see why you couldn't.
It's-
It's
Because
ADU.
a multifamily would be able to be sold. Right.
So there could be two sets of families with 4 kids living there, going to our schools, putting more of a burden on our already small school.
But that would have to, let's just say, call it a duplex at that point, right?
Well, it wouldn't be a duplex, really, right?
If you put a
But
wall
it's
up
a
with 2
duplex.
families and
He's
living
trying
in.
to-
Well, it's an ADU.
Just, creating.
Or an ADU, if it's
It's-
under 600 square feet now, or
Yeah.
800 then, if it passes,
You'd still have to,
then, yep. Yeah.
And you would have to just worry about the septic system. You
Right.
might have to enlarge it.
Right.
All the rules, just, yeah, you gotta
Yep.
meet all the.
So it's possible that could happen.
Well, it would go to the CEO, so she's gonna do
Right.
a certificate of occupancy, and it's going to stir up a bunch of questions for that department that they're going to look in, like, they're gonna do what I do, and they're gonna bounce all over the different ordinances and go, what do you need to comply with? And, it comes down to interpretation, so all of our interpretation of it may not be the CEO's interpretation, they may be like, nope, you have to follow this. But, yeah, it's
I would
gonna.
think an ADU, which it does say you can add to an existing home, if I remember reading it correctly. Even if it wasn't there, you could add it to an existing structure. It doesn't have to be a separate structure, correct?
Yeah, only so many
So I
square
don't see
feet.
why, if you have a structure now and you decided to divide it in a way that makes it conform to the ADU standards, that you would not be allowed to do that.
And that could be done on an unconforming lot.
As long as it
You're not changing your
conforms.
footprint.
Right.
Thanks.
We would prove that's correct, right?
Correct. Anything else?
Just a general question.
Sure.
Do you believe that the public knows what is going to happen with any of these ADU complete? I mean, here we are, we've got these out for people to vote on, but I'm not sure people know what they're voting on.
I think that we do the best we can. I mean, we put it on YouTube, we put it out there. I put it out on social media saying, come to a meeting or send us an email at our town email.
I mean, it's like a class E crime or something to influence a voter, so, you know, the ordinance review and myself and, you know, ballot clerks and town clerks and whatnot, like, we can't tell the voter what to vote, how to vote. So it's kind of like, in order for democracy to work, the voter has to act independently and make an independent decision. And that means they have to look for that information and educate themselves. So we've put out all the information. You guys are having 3 public hearings on it. You've recorded all your meetings. And, you know, anyone who ever phones in my office, hey, can I get a copy? You know, I'm willing to say, here you go. I think you stopped in today and picked up some stuff. So it's
Sir,
hard.
I mean, obviously you're concerned. Do you think there's going to be a big run on ADUs in the town of Lyman?
Yes. Real estate agents are gonna push it. I don't.
No,
mean
I
that.
don't, I mean, that doesn't,
Yeah.
well, that
I
kind of
understand,
doesn't make
yeah.
any sense though, really, because, I mean, just because somebody's putting an ADU, doesn't mean they're selling their house.
No.
Right, but if
But
you're
it just-
buying a house,
it just-
that is a selling point.
Pardon?
How many are
Oh,
you
you
gonna
could
put
add
in?
an ADU.
One,
I'm not gonna put any in. I said.
I might be able to put one over my garage across the street, but I'm not going to. I mean, the capability is there, which was never there before.
But the state mandates the ADU.
It's, yeah, I mean, this is from the state.
And it
The
can be,
one thing that was changed in that article for ADUs that was required by the state was the removal of the parking. Then it went on to remove, yes, the owner occupancy and the square footage and the turnaround. Matt had suggested the turnaround, that was changed as well. Those were just things that we all voted on.
But in the article you did, one of the articles said that you had to provide off-street parking, right? Or no on-street parking. Maybe that's why I read it.
Yeah,
One of those-
no on-street.
No
parking.
on-street parking.
Right.
So who's going to enforce it?
That with all the others, correct? Right, exactly. I don't disagree with that.
You volunteering?
No, I volunteered already. We put a parking ordinance in because the developments were parking their car in the road and letting the guys plow their driveways overnight.
No,
And
it's an expense.
Now, the
If you
plow
had a
driver can
bedroom,
call the cops and have them hauled.
A bigger septic, right?
So who's going to enforce it? The plow driver can enforce it. Just call it, we got a parking ordinance, they'll toll it.
Anybody, anything else?
I've heard some things tonight that it's kind of shows that maybe even you all don't understand everything that's in that. First of all, the idea of duplexes, an ADU wouldn't create a duplex.
Correct.
For instance, I know of a couple of them already in town. You can build a 3-bedroom unit and a 2-bedroom unit, and the 2-bedroom unit can be area-wise about 1,200 square feet, because the ordinance says it has to be 800 usable square feet. And if you go down and figure out what a usable square foot is, it usually comes out to be about at least an extra 25%. So we're going to have the opportunity for each lot to have a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom duplex on it. Now, the 2-bedroom duplex is going to allow for possibly an additional student in school. Now, granted, they won't all be an additional student, but some of them will. Now, when you put an ADU on a lot, you're adding only the value of the building because the lot is already taxed. So if you add a 2-bedroom ADU on your property, now that's probably, I'll say, maybe $200,000 in valuation, which comes out to be $2,500 in taxes. If you have one child in school from there, I'm sure you all realize that a child in school costs the town between $15,000 and $18,000 each. So for each ADU, theoretically, we could add a tax burden to the town of about $12,000. Now, granted, each one's not going to do that, but some of them will.
To that, I just want to say that, first of all, this is kind of fair housing stuff a little bit too. You can't just say you can't have kids, or, this ADU is for somebody with or without kids, or whatever the case
I
may
mean, we
be.
could always do
But-
ADUs.
ADUs are equally as much for elderly people who are living on, let's just say, a 5-acre lot, and they have a large home, and they can no longer care for the home. They're in their 80s. They don't have the money to snowplow. They don't have the money to shovel, hire it out. So they're having kid come home. You have my house because kid can't afford a house. Kid comes home, they build a small ADU for mom or dad, attached or unattached, doesn't matter. So there's just as many people for that reason as there are people who can't afford homes with children or without children. So it's really not a question for me of having children or not. It's about a major housing crisis. And we're trying to make it easier. I feel the whole committee, that was the purpose, in trying to make it easier for people to have places to live.
And I agree with that argument, and that's why when we wrote the original ADU ordinance, it was a 600 usable square foot ordinance, which was a 1-bedroom house, so that the person who was living there that wanted to have their kids in, fine. You got a 1-bedroom unit for the whoever you're going to put in there, whether you're going to put a student in there or you're going to move in there yourself, that's fine. That was perfect. That took care of the issue that you just talked about. What we've done by adding 200 more square feet is we've added another bedroom and possible taxes.
Well, actually, I think that the way it's been happening over the years is that they were taking out islands, they were taking out bathrooms, they were taking out, and they were calling it the habitable floor space. Well, I've looked at the other towns, 800 square feet seems to be the consensus. That's why I suggested it. Not everybody voted for it, but the majority did vote for 800 square feet.
And not necessarily 800 square feet is going to be for a second bedroom. It could be for bigger living space, or not every couple sleep in the same room.
Correct.
So,
The example that you just gave prior to that is exactly what I was talking about.
Mhm.
It should be owner living there. If the parents want to move to this and their kids move in, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with 2 different people living in the same
Can
property.
I ask you why?
Why?
What? Yeah.
I just think that because we don't have any enforcement in this town, okay, as far as policemen are concerned and that sort of stuff, or any noise ordinances that can be followed up by police or something of that
For
nature.
what particular reason?
What particular reason? I just think that there's not enough respect for other people's property in this town, or in any, I don't mean this town, any place anymore. There's no respect for authority. So if you had police in here, or you had somebody like that would do, then they would come. Because some of these ordinances we have, the state and the state police and the county police won't enforce, because it's a town ordinance. It's not a county ordinance or a state
I
ordinance.
think a lot of people want to go on the premise that I own this piece of property. But if I'm not there and I'm going to rent it, I'm going to rent it to someone that's undesirable and would be undesirable to the neighborhood. And I don't think people are going to do that again. I mean, if you were going to rent your property, would you rent it to someone that you had any questions that, may not respect the property or be undesirable for your neighbors? to have
Yes
in
or
there?
no? If I needed the money, yes. If I didn't need the money and I wanted somebody to take care of it, yes, I would, no problem. But there are people that will rent people just to get the money so they can go to Florida or somewhere.
Yeah, I
Or
think we're trying to-
rent to,
You can rent it either
Literally for
way. I mean,
income.
it's, yeah.
for an
But I
income.
think, people want to look more at the exception and not the rule. Is there a possibility? Yeah, but I mean, there's people that don't live on the property that have residential rentals, that the people are very nice and they're very good for the neighborhood.
Okay. if you rent it to somebody that is unreputable,
Yeah.
what recourse do I have as a neighbor? I don't have any in this town.
No.
You don't, but let's just take it away from the ponds for a minute, and let me ask you this. Do you think that we're only renting to unsavory people?
Oh, no, no.
So as a property owner, and that if you were in that circumstance, do you feel that it is your right or your neighbor's right to be able to rent their property?
Yes, with restrictions.
And I think that's really, to be honest with you, I think that's the way a lot of people felt. Again, not everybody, I'm not speaking for the whole committee, but it seemed as though that's where people felt, was that it was for property rights. They felt that, that was the argument that came up several times, that they felt it was the right of the property owner to be able to do that. If they want to go away to Florida for this winter and be able to rent their property, then I think that's ultimately what swayed them.
Thank you.
Kim, what
Thank you.
restrictions would you put on a rental? If your neighbor had a property they were gonna rent, what restrictions would you put?
I'd have a noise ordinance that could be enforced, okay? And I might put a limit on the number of people that can live in the property, depending on the size of the land.
Is there an enforceable noise ordinance now in Lyman?
I believe there's an ordinance, a noise ordinance, but I'm not sure it's enforceable.
Right.
No one's
So,
enforced.
You know,
No one has
Yeah.
enforced.
so a situation with noise, because I know that previous CEOs have gotten many calls for things, a whole range of things. So isn't it better to maybe address the possibility of a bigger problem than, we seem to want to create things for the exceptions and not the rules. This could possibly happen. Someone could rent. I mean, you could get a neighbor by the residence next to you. It could be the neighbor from hell. I mean, we just can't restrict everything. And I think that everybody thinks there's going to be a run on ADUs. And if you increase the bedrooms, you're talking about new septics. I mean, as Mr. Dulong said, you know, it could cost $200,000. It's not going to be cheap. And I don't think people,
And not only that, it
everybody's
becomes
going to be
commercial
putting in
once you rent it.
ADUs.
So the value is higher. So it's gonna be more than 200,000.
But, you know, we see the concerns. We're trying to be less restrictive. But I think that now any of these situations you could have with someone that moves into a community and buys a residence, they can be disruptive, they can be unsavory.
They can rent their property
Yeah.
to a family of 8 kids when
It
they may
just,
have none.
But in Lyman, again, we have no enforcement of these items.
Correct.
So if somebody moves in, like you say, with 8
You know,
kids, and they're all
noise-
on motorcycles and whatnot, what can you do?
911.
Buy a motorcycle yourself and sit next door to them, I guess. I don't know.
Noise is one of the hardest things
Yeah.
to enforce. I mean, it's just, a lot of the ordinances, so many decibels at the property line. I mean, obviously, if someone's running a lawnmower on the property line, it's gonna be high. It's just very hard to do. And one thing with Brenda was, that she was desirable for us to do, she wanted enforceable ordinances.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
So seeing the good in people is a good thing. No one's saying that all these people are going to be moving here and riffraff, but you don't know. There's people with apartment complexes. You don't really know, but there's a background check. They come in, they could be horrible. There's huge tracts of land in this town. And if a developer got a hold of those tracts of land and decided they wanted to put two units on each piece of property and rent them all out, they could do that because they don't have to live on the property. So you could have a 200 acre, 600 acre piece of property cut up, bunch of houses put on it, all of them rented out. And Are they going to vet the people? I don't know. I'm sure they will because they don't want their house to be destroyed. But it's just like renting an apartment in an apartment complex. You can only do so much. So taking that out, the owner occupied, can cause big problems.
Is the possibility it can cause? Yes. Now, Brian, do you have any experience renting residential real estate?
Me
Or
personally,
your parents,
I don't have any personally.
mom and dad?
Yeah,
Okay. And do they live on the property?
no,
Has there been a problem?
no.
Okay. You have a very nice tenant. I think the majority, we're always looking for the possibility. Anything can happen, Brian.
It's great to think of the best in everything,
Brian,
but it doesn't work that way.
well,
There's always going to be something bad that happens
And that's
yes,
why- and
something
that's why
can
we have
happen. You
ordinances,
can walk
because
down
then
the
we
street.
can
that
address
can't be
it.
enforced.
We can then address
I
it.
just don't think the owner occupied should be removed from it. The ADUs, whatever, it is what it is. We have to have the
owner
ADUs.
being on that
I agree with
property.
the people having a place to live and their kids moving in. I just believe that
Right.
the owner occupied should stay
It's
in it.
not going to be a problem.
You don't know that.
I-
So
I-
you can tell me it's not going to be a problem.
The majority of people, Brian, are not going to rent to someone that they think is undesirable and unsafe.
You're right, but they don't know. They don't know these people.
If
And
there is
they
a
may know them.
problem, though, you correct the problem.
Go ahead, Buzz.
I know, I don't want to make you faster than that. If you don't like it, this is only an informational meeting. And if you don't like an ordinance, vote against it.
I will.
Easy as that.
And it's
Well,
not,
I'm sure.
again, it's
I'm
not,
sure there's other people that will,
we're,
but
the majority of the board came down to the property owner's rights. That's really, it seemed, the consensus at the time that we voted.
But there's the property owners and there's the property owners that live next to the property owners. And that's
Those are the people
everywhere.
That are gonna vote no, those are the yous.
And-
that are
and
gonna
that's-
vote no, and
that's
okay.
everywhere.
I have
That's
no
okay,
neighbors.
it's totally fine.
You have a
I'm
neighbor somewhere.
I'm not-
You're not on an island somewhere.
4 acres away from me.
Yeah, you still have a neighbor.
I know, but
We're not
I'm not
here to
gonna-
try to persuade you differently, we're really not,
I'm just
and
trying to
I'm,
answer
I am
questions.
not here to change anybody's mind or anything. I'm just simply saying, this is the way we felt, we came at it, most of the people came at it from property rights. I came at it from a different point, I came at it from compassion. We are in a major housing crisis, and
There's only one way
I
to fix
know
that, and
that-
it's not in this town.
what's that?
There's only one way to fix that, and it's not anything that we can do in this town.
Well,
No, I disagree.
but your neighbors in this town, residents in this town are hurting. Whether you know that or not, I'm not aware, but they are. We have the largest population of 65 and older in the country, not just Maine, but, Lyman, but the state of Maine has the largest population of elderly people. This document, our comprehensive plan, requires us to find housing for our elderly. And this document has sat on the shelf for many years, and there is no elderly housing in this community. And if I can vote to make that a little simpler for some of the elderly in this town, that's where I came from.
But let me ask this, how long has Lyman been able to have
Right.
additional dwelling
Peggy's
units?
a lifetime resident here.
What'd you say?
How long
She
has
just-
Lyman been able to have
Yeah.
additional
She's been
dwelling
here all her
units?
life.
Hold on.
Okay.
I've been like 50 years.
Hold on one sec.
We'd like to see this remain country, but the state said
It's not,
no.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
I would like to see it stay that way too, but
But
things moving in that direction are not leaving it that way.
We're gonna let Steve talk.
How long have people in Lyman been able to apply for additional dwelling units?
Many years,
How long's the ordinance been there?
many years.
76?
Since 76, you could
That's
have
the
an
original
additional
ordinance.
dwelling unit. Do we know how many there are?
Oh,
I-
no, I don't have a record of
I mean,
Do we have any?
no,
that. No.
no,
Okay.
no.
So since 76 people have been able to have, I don't know if anybody, I don't know a lot of people here that have additional dwelling units. I just think we're looking and try to frighten everybody that all of a sudden there's gonna be 1 million additional dwelling units. They're not gonna be cheap, Brian. And people inherently are just not gonna wanna do them.
And that's fine. Just leave the owner occupied in there.
Why?
But then
Why
you're
do you
taking
wanna
my
be
rights away.
restrictive on people?
You would take my rights away by doing that.
Well,
I'm a
I can't
homeowner.
drive my car and not
I'm a
wear a seatbelt
homeowner,
either
right
without
now
getting a
I
ticket.
can rent my home if I wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But if you say I can't because of an ADU, you're restricting me from use of my home and what I want to do with it. Why would you do that? I can rent it now if I wanted to, but if I put an ADU, you're telling me I can't. That doesn't make, that, in my mind, I have a hard time.
No, you can rent your home, you just have to live in the ADU.
Why? I can rent my, I don't have an ADU and I can rent my home now, correct?
Correct.
But if I build an ADU, you're gonna take that right away from me.
In order to have the ADU.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Fine.
Well, you're getting 2 dwellings on 1 lot that you normally wouldn't be able to
We're not
have.
the only town that does it.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just, for me, that doesn't make sense to me. to
Why
take
do you
a
wanna
right
be
from
so
me.
restrictive?
But other
It's
than-
not enough
other than
for
that,
people
My,
to live
my,
today. Why do you wanna be so restrictive?
I don't know, Steve.
Okay, you had a situation that you had a neighbor, or your dad did, that was just undesirable. He lived there. You can't stop all this.
You're right. You can't stop it.
Things happen. So you just want to punish the masses because the possibility of something. I understand when you're going, we want to preserve Lyman. And you know what? Even if the lot size changes, people that have large tracts of land are all of a sudden going to decide to break things up. You know, if people put in subdivisions, they're not going to all of a sudden spend another maybe $250,000 to have an ADU. It's not going to be a selling point, Brian. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And you know what? If it does, you can always do an ordinance change. You can step in.
Or just vote
Yeah.
no. That's it. We're just an advisory committee.
I get
This
it.
is not we're not saying here,
We all
town,
live
we're
here.
gonna
We
shove
don't
this down
want
the
to see
throat.
Lyman change
It
drastically.
really is that
It's
simple.
not going to happen.
As we just advise and we say, here, you guys, and take a
Vote
look.
it
If
up,
you don't
vote it
like
down,
it,
your choice.
vote yes
That's
or
the way
no.
we feel.
and that's all it boils down to. I don't care if it all goes by the wayside and they say no. Then I know what our town wants.
Right. That's the
I
way
don't
feel, too.
I'm not out telling people how to vote. I'm not out telling people you should or you shouldn't. I'm just saying, here it is. This is what it is. This is the part we changed. If you like it, vote yes. If you don't, vote no. It's that simple.
So to change the subject, Article 1, we're calling it an amendment to Article 1. It's really not an amendment. You're doing away with the whole thing.
It's an amendment
To
to
the
the
zoning
Lyman
ordinance.
To the
ordinance.
zoning,
It's an
Brian, it's
amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Right. Peggy,
Yes.
if I remember right, back when we started looking at the contract zoning, one member told us to check with all the other towns, and the majority of your lawsuits came from contract zoning. I don't know if that was true, but that was told to us by a member.
But specifically to
And-
your question, it
And
is
I
an
could
amendment to the
see
zoning
that.
ordinance,
Okay.
That's
not an
what we
amendment
wanted
to that
dig out.
article. It's an amendment to the whole.
You know what I'd be more worried about, Brian? The fact
Joe
is
was
that
here.
we all got signatures. A lot of people had questions. There's you and your dad and this other gentleman here. I mean,
And that's sad.
and
It
it is.
is, we
And it is.
would agree with you.
So, but as Peggy said, we're just here to put out proposals. I'm just against restrictions
Well,
because I know a lot of people, that's all they have is their property. And I just want to restrict them as little as possible. And I don't think people inherently, if they have to rent, they're gonna, just for the sake of some money, if there's a question, they're not gonna rent it to someone that's going to damage or destroy what they've worked for all their lives.
Hopefully not.
It's just not gonna happen, Brian.
I'd just like to elaborate on something that Ken said about shoreland zoning versus the other areas. Shoreline zoning is its own zone. The multi-unit item that you were referencing doesn't apply to shoreline zoning. Shoreline zoning, most of the lots are non-conforming lots. A conforming lot on shoreland is 200 feet on the shore and 200 feet deep. Very few lots on any of the shoreline zones like that. Most of the lots are, some of the lots are 50 feet wide. About 1965, the state came through and mandated 100 feet wide. So a lot of the lots that were purchased after 1965 are 100 feet wide. Then along came the state and said it's got to be 200. But by the time they did that, Lyman was already subdivided. The problem I have with taking the ADU ordinance that's used for the regular zone, which is 3 and 5 acre lots. You put an ADU on a 5 acre lot, and you got plenty of room around you. You put an ADU on a 3 acre lot, you got plenty of room around you. You put an ADU on a 100-foot wide lot, you don't have a lot of room. And on the ponds, a lot of the rental properties are going to be by the week and not by the long-term rentals. They're going to be short-term rentals. I cannot understand why this group decided to make the ADU ordinance exactly the same for shoreland as for the rest.
Fairness.
Because it's a whole different thing. A whole different thing. I'm done. You can talk.
Fairness.
Was there a separate ADU ordinance for shoreland before?
You should know that.
Well, I don't. I'm asking the question.
No. It
Okay.
had to be, we had to have a shoreland ADU ordinance printed. My recommendation was that we use the one that the town had before, which was 600 square feet and owner occupied. That would solve the weekly rental issues. It would solve the area. I mean, we've got pretty crowded areas along the pond. We've got some of those that have more than one unit already. So don't say there won't be any, because there already are some. And there are more coming in all the time.
But from 76, when we could do ADUs, could the shoreland people?
Wait. I can elaborate on that too. We didn't have an ADU ordinance until sometime in the mid-2000s. I was on the planning board
Okay.
when we
I
wrote
just
the
went
ADU
by
ordinance, so
something
it
you
didn't
say.
come in until
So,
the 2000s.
but from the time we had it, Dave, could people on the shoreland zoning do an ADU if they met requirements?
No, they couldn't legally. Did they? Yes. Could they do it legally? No.
So the ADU was just for everything except shoreland
Correct.
zoning?
Shoreline zone allowed no ADUs.
Okay.
Just some clarification, in the shoreline ordinance, there are provisions for 1 and 2 family residential units or dwellings, and also multi-unit residential.
On shoreline?
In shoreline,
I'd sure like to see that. Could you give me the reference?
yeah, in the land use table on page 13.
The shoreline land use table?
Yep, I'm reading it from the shoreline land use table.
You're reading it out of the shoreline ordinance. Okay. And what was the reference again?
The
Page
land
13?
use table.
Because never did the state allow for multifamily houses in shoreline zone. So I don't know how that even got in there.
Yeah, it says the CEO, let's see.
Wasn't
Oh,
that
planning
Campbell
board.
House just
Planning-
sold as a 2-family?
What's that?
Wasn't that Campbell House just sold as a 2-family?
The Campbell House, I'll tell you what happened to the Campbell House. They were given the ability to put an ADU in, which was illegal.
Well, we're not gonna talk about
Yeah.
specific situations.
That's off the subject.
Right, I was just curious. 'cause I
Anybody
thought it was a
have
2-family.
anything else? Joe, did you have something? No, I think that's it.
Yeah, how's selectmen going?
Swimmingly.
A thumbs up?
Anybody have anything else? No? Okay, so if we have no further comment, it will conclude the public hearing. And I guess we are adjourned. That's it.
Do we have a date for the next public hearing?
We haven't made one yet. We were gonna make one actually, I think, at this meeting, but we haven't made one yet. But we'll figure that out and put it out there for everybody. Okay,
Thank you guys for coming.
yes, sure.
I emailed her.
Ken, thank you for coming.
I didn't email. The one that Jess.
Well,
Her phone's
do
ringing
want-
off the hook now. You did her a good
Wait,
thing.
I wanna add to that.
You just gave me a lot of business, Kim.
But I do want to that
You own the building.
Hold on.
we
still
live?
Hold on.
I do.
I thought it was over.
That came from here. For the elderly. Yes, thank you. I'm just gonna shut this down 1 second, Steve.
Yeah, we haven't contacted him yet. I just answered the email that Gene sent, the last email Gene sent. Some more.
Off.
Yeah.